What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We've got a full Thursday MLB slate to break down, and this is one of those cards where you really have to pay attention to the little things: pitching form, bullpen reliability, ballpark factors, and which offenses are actually in a good enough spot to cash in. There are a couple games I like, a few totals that stand out, and one or two spots where the value just feels better than the raw number on the board. So let's get right into it. First up, Toronto heading to Boston. This is a game where I think the market may be slightly overvaluing Boston just because of the pitching matchup and the name recognition of some of the arms involved. Toronto hasn't been great offensively this year, and that's really been the main reason this team has been inconsistent, but they do still have enough contact ability to make things interesting. The Blue Jays starter has been decent overall, and he's already shown he can handle Boston in this matchup earlier in the season. That matters, because when a pitcher has already proven he can get through a lineup once, I'm a little less eager to fade him just because of a couple rough starts. Boston, on the other hand, is still a team I have trouble trusting at the plate. Their offense has been one of the weakest parts of their season, and even though they've got some individual bats that can put together a good night, this still doesn't feel like a lineup that should be laying too much respect. Sonny Gray has been excellent, no question about it. He's been one of the better starters in this spot, and that's the main reason Boston is favored. But for me, the value is just not quite there on the Red Sox side if the number gets too inflated. If I had to lean one way, I'd probably lean Red Sox, but this is not a game I want to force too hard. My best pick here is probably the under. Toronto hasn't been scoring a ton, Boston hasn't been scoring a ton, and both starting pitchers are good enough to keep this game in check if they're on. Next up, Cleveland and Milwaukee. This is one of the better underdog spots on the board for me. The Guardians have not been a great offensive team all year, but they do have a young arm here who can absolutely keep them in the game. Parker Messick has been throwing the ball well overall, and even though he's coming off a rougher outing, I still think the underlying form has been good enough to give him some respect. Milwaukee is the better overall team, no doubt. They've been much stronger offensively, they've got a solid bullpen, and they've been great at home. But there's a difference between being the better team and being a great price, and right now I think Cleveland is live enough to make this interesting. The key for me is that Milwaukee's starter hasn't exactly been sharp every time out. He's had some solid starts, but there have also been enough mediocre ones lately to make me think this isn't a spot where he should be fully trusted. If Cleveland can keep this game close early, I think they can absolutely sneak in through the back door. And with Messick on the mound at a plus price, I'm willing to take a shot. So my best pick is Guardians here at plus money. The total also makes some sense to me on the under, especially if the Cleveland offense stays quiet for long stretches. Now to Minnesota and Texas. This is a game where I think the Twins are in a pretty good spot. Joe Ryan gives them the kind of starting pitching edge that matters. He's been one of the more reliable arms on this team, and while he hasn't been dominant every single outing, he's been good enough to give Minnesota a real chance to win most nights. That's especially important against a Texas team that has not been doing much at the plate. The Rangers' offense has been the problem for a while now. There just hasn't been enough consistency from that lineup, and when you pair that with a young starter who has had a rough stretch, it's hard to feel confident backing them. Jack Leiter has had flashes, but lately those flashes have been way too few and far between. If he's giving up 4 or more earned runs repeatedly, that's a real concern, especially against a team that's at least been better than expected offensively. Minnesota's offense has also been more productive than people thought coming into the season, and even though their bullpen is a major concern, I think the matchup still tilts their way. So for me, my best pick is Twins. The total is tricky because of the Rangers' offense, but I wouldn't be shocked if Minnesota does most of the damage here and Texas continues to struggle. Next game, Baltimore and Seattle. This one is a little tougher to separate than some of the others. Baltimore has the better offensive upside, and that's what makes them live in almost any matchup. They've got enough bats that can punish mistakes, and even though the results haven't always been clean, the lineup still has some dangerous pieces. Seattle, though, gets the benefit of a strong home setup and a better bullpen. That matters a lot, especially in a game where the starting pitching is not exactly flawless on either side. I also think Seattle's starter has some bounce-back potential here. He hasn't been consistent, but he's shown enough to make me think he can settle in at home and put together a decent outing. Baltimore's starter has had his own issues, and that's what makes this game feel a little shaky. If neither pitcher is at his best, the over becomes playable. If one of them settles in, then this could turn into a lower scoring game than expected. Because of that, I'm not super strong on a side here. If I had to choose, I'd maybe shade Mariners at home, but my best pick is the over if the number is reasonable. Now to New York and Philadelphia. This is a pretty interesting divisional matchup because the Mets are still trying to find some rhythm, while the Phillies are still trying to get more consistent production from the lineup. The Mets have actually been giving themselves a chance with pitching lately. Their bullpen has been strong, and they've had enough decent starts to stay competitive, but the problem is still the offense. They just haven't scored enough this season, and that's what keeps making them a tough team to trust. Philadelphia, meanwhile, has not exactly been an offensive machine either. They've got power in the lineup, but the overall consistency just hasn't been there the way you'd want. That's why I'm not rushing to lay a huge number with them. I do think Aaron Nola is a little overvalued in this spot. The Phillies may have won with him on the mound, but the underlying performances have not been all that impressive. That gives the Mets some appeal as a road underdog. So my best pick is Mets at plus money. The total is also interesting because both offenses have been uneven enough that the under makes some sense, especially if the starters do their job early. Next up, Chicago and New York. This is one of the more straightforward games on the board for me. The Yankees are the better team, they've been hitting the ball well, and they're at home. That's already enough to put them in a strong position. Add in the fact that the White Sox bullpen has not been especially reliable, and it gets even harder to see Chicago pulling this one off. That said, I actually think the total is the better angle here. Both teams have enough bats to contribute, and the recent game flow suggests there could be plenty of offense in this one. If the starters don't get deep, the bullpens are going to have to do work, and that can turn into a messy game pretty fast. The Yankees are obviously the side I trust more, but my best pick is the over better than the side. Now to San Francisco and Atlanta. This is another game where the Braves are the better team, but the question is whether the number is worth it and whether the total is in the right range. Atlanta has been in a little bit of a slump lately, but I'm not overreacting to that. They still have the better roster, the better bullpen, and the stronger home profile. That's enough for me to keep them in play here. The Giants, meanwhile, are still not a team I trust very much on the road. Their offense has shown some signs of life, but I still need to see a lot more before I start giving them too much credit. If Atlanta gets a decent outing from the starter, they should be in a good spot to control this one. The total, though, is my best pick, and is where things get more interesting. This feels like a game where the number could be a little too high if both pitchers do enough to keep the scoreboard moving slowly. Next up, St. Louis and Kansas City. This is a classic spot where I think the under has real value. Neither offense has been consistently explosive enough to make me want to chase a high-scoring game, and both starters are good enough to keep things manageable for at least part of the night. That's usually the kind of setup where the under becomes the cleaner angle. St. Louis has been a little better offensively overall, and they've got enough pieces to pressure Kansas City. The Royals, though, have not been doing enough at the plate to make me feel like they should be trusted on a regular basis. I would lean slightly toward the Cardinals if I had to choose a side, but again, my best pick here is the under. Last game on the board, the Angels and Athletics. This one feels like a pretty close spot to me. The Angels have the better name recognition, and they've got a starter here who can absolutely handle business when he's right. But there are still some health questions, and I don't love the uncertainty around that. The Athletics are at home, and while their bullpen is a concern, their offense has been better than people tend to give them credit for. They've got enough contact ability to make this interesting, especially if the Angels' bullpen gets involved late. If I had to make a call, I'd slightly lean Athletics at home because I trust the spot a little more, and I'm not fully comfortable with the Angels' back-end situation. I'm not strongly tied to the total either, but this is the kind of game where runs could show up if the relief pitching gets tested. That's the full board for today. A few good home spots, a couple live underdogs, and some totals that make more sense once you look at the pitching and bullpen situations a little deeper. So that's where I'm landing today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with somebody who's betting these games tonight. It helps the channel a lot, and it lets me keep bringing you these daily picks and breakdowns. And I'll catch you in the next one.